Okay, people. Now we're gonna move on to Rome. We talked about the Etruscans. Now I'm just gonna give you some historical background of Rome. I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm a historian by nature, and this is one of my favorite periods of time, the ancient world. So we're only gonna cover 3 slides in my air quotes. We only cover 3 slides, but I'm giving you a lot of background, a lot of historical background to Rome, how it was founded, um, just some things that you need to know. I am giving you the brief history of Rome in a handful of slides. So get ready. The early Roman history was clearly intertwined with that of the Etruscans, right? I can't say that enough. And it is believed that the kings that ruled Rome during the early years, the early period of Roman history, were really Etruscan kings, and that slowly, one by one, these Etruscan kings were overthrown and lost their independence and became one of the many ethnic strands that wove into the Roman Republic. Oddly, there are two myths of how the Roman people came to be, how Rome came to be, and one is a Greek story, and one is a Roman story. And the Greek story is of Aeneas. He is a Trojan prince that came to Italy. He left. He was one of the few survivors from the fallen city of Troy. So hopefully you know the story of Troy. And they went on a series of sea adventures around the Mediterranean and eventually landed on the Italian coast. And again, there is proof, like we said, we've seen the intermingling of the two cultures, so we do know that there's a Greek influence in those early Etruscan and Roman lands. In direct conflict with that of the Greek origin is the Italian myth of Romulus and Remus, and that is the picture that you see there. And Romulus and Remus were reportedly, the sons of God, of the god either Mars or of the hero Hercules, and they were abandoned at birth. And a lot of mythological heroes were abandoned at birth because somebody was afraid it was going to overthrow them. Basically, like an older generation thought that the younger generation was going to overthrow them. So the twins were abandoned at birth. And they were abandoned on the river Tiber, which still exists in Rome today, and they were nurtured by a she-wolf. And that is the picture that you see here, Romulus and Remus suckling on the teat. These are all the historical words on the teat of the she-wolf that raised them, and that they founded the city. And ultimately, when they became adults, they did murder the person that had them, sent to their death, because that's what they thought they were doing by abandoning them on the river. And they decided to establish a city on what is now known as the Palatine Hill, that still exists here today. That's the image that you see in the top picture. And long story short, the brothers didn't get along either, and Romulus killed his brother Remus, and that's why the city we know is now called Rome. So again, neither one of these stories is good, but these are some of the founding myths of the Roman civilization. Okay, last slide on the history. There's so much Roman history that I want to give you, but I'm going to give you the abbreviated version. Okay, so all right, so let's talk about the Roman Republic. So the Roman Republic um, is dates from about 509 to, which is weird. They picked the date 509, 509 to about 27 of the before the Common Era, and it had a conservative government with two elected bodies, and basically like we do, they had senators and congress people. They didn't call them that, but that's the easiest way for us um, to make the correlation to what we have now. And they were elected annually. They were only elected by folks that were citizens. So citizens were only men, and were only men of Roman birth or of conquered lands. We'll talk about that in a second. So basically lands that Rome conquered that then granted them citizenship. Rome was really good for taking people in and making them citizens. But Rome did have a Senate, and it had a popular assembly. And, under this form of government, they fought a whole bunch of wars that expanded control all over Italy. And they fought in North Africa. They fought a lot with Carthage, whose empire stretched, all over North Africa, and they just quarreled over the island of Sicily. And there were wars that Romans fought outside of the Italian peninsula, and they wanted the control of Sicily because Sicily was seen as a stopping point in the Mediterranean Sea on, coming from Africa and going to Africa. That's why both Carthage and Rome wanted to have control of Sicily, because it was important for their trading. But ultimately, under the Republic, Roman rule dominated North Africa, large areas of the Middle East, Eastern Europe, and up to the Danube River, so all the way up to Germany. And when I say Africa, North Africa and Middle East, we're talking, Egypt and Morocco and Libya, in addition to Iran, Iraq, Palestine / Jerusalem, depending on what your politics are, right? All of those areas. And so most of continental Europe, Rome had control over. Rome became a very wealthy and complex society, and strains of warfare, constant warfare, led to strife, led to social strife. So there was a rivalry to rule, and when you get to, if you take ancient history, you take history of this period, it's nothing but warfare. Like, there's some good stuff sprinkled in, but it's war, and ambitious general over ambitious general, and somebody always fighting for power. And one of the stories that you most definitely have heard is the stabbing of Julius Caesar, right? How he was assassinated. He was just assassinated over a struggle for power, and that's really what started the downfall of Rome as the classical Roman era, of it being a republic, to about 27 BCE. So, after the death of Caesar, Augustus took charge. He was his adopted son. Actually, he was his grandnephew, and he laid the foundation to what would become what's known as the Pax Romana. So Augustus was the first Roman emperor, and hopefully Augustus, because Augustus is August, right? Many of our months of the year are named, and almost all of our constellations are named after either Greek or Roman god. So the month of August is named after Augustus. The month of July is after Julius Caesar. So Julius became July. If you didn't know that, now you know. So Augustus ushered in what is known as the Pax Romana. And it's just 200 years of peace. And, with the death of Caesar, the Roman Empire was solidified. And it wasn't really until the 3rd century of the Common Era. So if we go from 27 BC to, to the Common Era, to about the same time in the Common Era, to the 300s in the Common Era, that we really see the fall of the Roman Empire. And what contributed to that decline was just incompetence and quality of some of the emperor. There's some nut jobs in there. If you have ever heard anything about Nero, he was crazy, and just anarchy and civil war and a failed economy and just collapse of society. So, and then you take also the migration of German peoples, German tribes south, just added a whole host of other problems too. So in about 325 of the Common Era, the Emperor Constantine built a new center. So he moved the headquarters away from Rome. His city was actually called Constantinople. The Emperor Constantine also was the first known Roman emperor to follow Christianity. There's a whole bunch of stories about that too. I hate to say, this is my totally love period of history until Constantinople. So I have too much information, but we're going to keep it going. So Constantinople, which is now called Istanbul in Turkey, started the Byzantine Empire. So really with the move away from Rome being the center of the empire, with the move to Constantinople, to Istanbul, there was a change in what we know as Roman life. So this is what we're going to do. The crazy part is, if we look at this, we're looking at for between the Roman Republic and the Byzantine Empire, we're looking at like 700 years of history, right? So from 509 to about 325 of the Common Era, and some folks say 400 of the Common Era. So we're looking at between 700 and 900 years of history, right? So we are just going to focus on what is known as the classical Roman era and look at classical Roman clothing. And even though we're talking about a real long stretch of time, the styles didn't really change. So we're going to talk about, going forward, we're going to talk about the social structure, we're going to talk about social life, we're going to talk a little bit about the social distinctions of dress, because there was dress that was distinctive. Of course, I got a story for you. I got a story of talking about how folks should and shouldn't dress. We're going to talk about that. We talk about fabric and clothing production as well. Fabric, clothing, textile production. We'll talk about that. And we'll of course, we'll look at some pictures of components for men and women, and we'll dive deep into what the toga looked like. So that's what we're going to talk about for the rest of the lecture. I just gave you a whole bunch of history. So now let's actually look at some pictures and talk about the details of what it looked like. All right. So the social life, right? So the social life of Romans. So during this Roman Republic period, right? During this early period, the population of the city of Rome was estimated to be about 1 million people, right? That's crazy. If we think about 1 million people, cities now, and that's a lot. I can imagine that with no sanitation, right? So it was estimated to be about 1 million, even though the picture that we see here is of an aqueduct. So they did have running water. That's another story. But about 1 million people. So the city consisted of citizens, which were men. It consisted of citizens and their family, their slaves, and any foreigners that lived in the city as well. And only men were citizens, but citizens, they could be rich, they could be middle class, or they could be poor. And as Rome began to conquer more and more lands, they actually extended citizenship to the folks that they conquered. And it's estimated that by the 2nd century, so at the end, at the move to the Byzantine Empire, that about 90% of Roman citizens were of some foreign extraction, right? That they had been granted citizenship by being conquered, and not just through Roman birth. So well-to-do folks lived in townhouses on the ground floor. And less affluent people lived in apartment buildings. Sometimes they lived on higher floors of the townhouses of the wealthy, but the wealthy always had the ground floor. And it was a city of a million people, so they were, the lower you are on the social spectrum, no matter what your civilization looks like, the lower you are, there's poor lighting, bad ventilation, and the constant threat of disastrous fires were part of the social life of the day.